The night my restaurant hit a 6-month waiting list, the hostess whispered something that made my stomach drop. "Table 7 says they're your family." I looked across the dining room, and there they were. The same people who once said I would never become anything. The same people who threw my suitcase onto the lawn 4 years ago like I was garbage. My father raised his hand and waved at me like we had just seen each other last Sunday for dinner. Then he said something that made the whole room go quiet. "Since you used our house as a stepping stone," he said calmly, "we deserve 15% of this place. Stick with me. Because 4 years ago, I didn't even have enough money to buy groceries. Back then my life fell apart the day I dropped out of law school. My family had already planned my entire future. Law school first, then a big corporate job through my father's connections. After that, a safe and respectable life that looked good to everyone. There was just one problem. I hated it. What I loved was cooking. I had kept it a secret for a long time. Late at night, I would watch cooking videos and try recipes in the kitchen when nobody was home. It made me feel alive in a way law school never did. So one night I finally told them the truth. I said I wanted to become a chef. I thought they would be disappointed. But what happened was much worse. My father, Douglas Whitcomb, stared at me like I had insulted the family name. "You're throwing away everything," he said coldly. "The Whitcomb reputation is not built on kitchen jobs." My brother Travis laughed out loud. "Oh great," he said. "My sister dropped out of law school so she can flip burgers." My mother Marlene didn't even try to hide her disgust. "People work in kitchens when they fail at everything else," she said. The argument lasted for hours. Voices got louder. Doors slammed. At one point my father pointed toward the front door and gave me the only choice he was willing to offer. "Either you go back to law school," he said, "or you leave this house." I remember standing there with my heart pounding. Then I made the choice that changed everything. I packed 2 suitcases. I had $240 in my bank account. And I walked out the front door. My family didn't try to stop me. The first place I lived after leaving home was a tiny room above a laundromat. It was the only place I could afford with the little money I had. The walls smelled like soap and damp plaster all the time. Late at night, I could hear washing machines spinning and people talking downstairs while they waited for their clothes to dry. It wasn't comfortable, but it was mine. The next problem was finding work. I went to every place that had a kitchen and asked if they were hiring. Most restaurants said no. A few laughed when I told them I had dropped out of law school to cook. Finally, a small diner on the edge of town needed a dishwasher. The owner was a rough, serious chef named Gideon Price. He didn't smile much, and he didn't waste words. When I asked for the job, he just looked at me for a moment and pointed toward the sink. "Start there," he said. That was my beginning. Every day I stood in the back of the kitchen washing stacks of greasy plates and heavy pans. The water was always hot, and by the end of each shift my hands were red and sore. Gideon barely noticed me at first. To him I was just another dishwasher passing through. But something about that kitchen made me happy. I loved the smell of garlic and butter in the air. I loved hearing the cooks call out orders and watching how fast everything moved. After my shifts ended, I didn't go home right away. I stayed behind and used leftover ingredients to practice cooking small dishes. Nothing fancy, just experiments. One night I made roasted tomato soup and added a little smoked paprika. I left it on the counter and went back to cleaning. A few minutes later Gideon walked past, tasted it, and stopped. He looked at the bowl, then at me. For a long moment he didn't say anything. Then he said, "You're wasting your time with dishes." My heart sank because I thought he was about to fire me. Instead he nodded toward the kitchen line. "Prep station tomorrow morning," he said. That moment changed my life. From that day on, I started learning everything I could. Knife skills, sauces, how to manage a kitchen, how to control food costs. Gideon was strict, but he taught me the real way to cook. While my life slowly moved forward, my family stayed completely silent. No phone calls. No birthday messages. No holidays together. It was like I had disappeared from their world. But I kept working, because I was building something they never believed I could have. A dream. Gideon Price slowly became more than just my boss. Over time, he became the mentor I never had. He was not the kind of person who gave compliments easily. In fact, most days he barely said anything nice at all. But he was fair, and he always told the truth. If I made a mistake, he made sure I fixed it the right way. One night, I ruined a whole batch of risotto during dinner prep. I added too much broth and the rice turned into a sticky mess. I thought he would just throw it away and move on. Instead, he pushed another bag of rice toward me. Again, he said. I made it a second time. It still wasn't perfect. Again. By the time I finished the sixth attempt, my arms were tired and my patience was gone. But when he tasted it, he gave a small nod. Now that's risotto, he said. Moments like that were how he taught me. He didn't give long speeches or soft encouragement. When I did something wrong, he made me repeat it until I got it right. When I finally nailed a difficult dish, he would just nod once and move on to the next task. One evening, after I finished a busy dinner service, he leaned against the counter and looked at me for a moment. You're stubborn, he said. I wasn't sure if that was an insult. Then he added, That's useful in kitchens. After 2 years of working there, Gideon trusted me more than anyone else in the diner. Some nights, he even let me run the entire dinner service while he stayed in his office doing paperwork. Those nights were stressful, but they also made me stronger. Then one evening, after closing time, he called me over. The kitchen was quiet, and the last customers had already left. He handed me a folder and told me to sit down. Inside the folder were papers full of numbers. Financial statements. I looked up, confused. We're closing, Gideon said calmly. My stomach dropped. The diner had become my whole world. I didn't know what I would do without it. But before I could say anything, Gideon continued. I'm retiring, he said. Been doing this too long. I stared at the papers again, feeling lost. Then he surprised me. But you, he said, pointing at me, you should open something of your own. I laughed right away. The idea sounded impossible. I can't do that, I said. I don't have money for a place like that. Gideon didn't argue. He simply reached into the folder and slid a check across the counter toward me. I'm investing, he said. For the first time in my life, someone truly believed in me. Opening a restaurant turned out to be much harder than I ever imagined. At first, I thought the hardest part would be cooking. I believed if the food was good, everything else would fall into place. I was wrong. The first problem started with the building itself. The space I found was old and needed a lot of repairs. The contractor kept delaying the work. Every week there was a new excuse. Broken pipes. Electrical problems. Missing materials. Each delay cost money I didn't really have. Then came the loan rejections. I went to several banks with my business plan, hoping someone would believe in the idea. Most of them didn't even look interested. One manager skimmed the papers and shook his head. Restaurants fail all the time, he said. Too risky. I walked out of that bank feeling smaller than ever. Even after Gideon's investment, every dollar had to be stretched. Some nights I stayed at the restaurant until 2 a.m. trying to figure out how to pay the next bill. More than once I slept on the restaurant floor. I simply couldn't afford both my rent and the contractor payments at the same time. So I chose the restaurant. I kept telling myself it would be worth it one day. Slowly, piece by piece, the place began to come together. The kitchen equipment was installed. The walls were painted. Tables and chairs finally filled the empty dining room. Standing there one night, I realized the restaurant needed a name. I remembered something Gideon once told me about my cooking. He said the flavors I liked most were bold smoke and unexpected sweetness. So I named the restaurant Ash and Honey. It felt perfect. Around that time, I met Matteo Calder. He had experience managing restaurants and had heard about my project through a friend. We met inside the half-finished dining room while construction tools were still scattered around. Matteo looked around slowly, taking everything in. Then he turned to me and smiled slightly. You're either very brave, he said, or completely insane. I laughed because he wasn't wrong. Probably both, I replied. Matteo decided to join the team, and from that moment on he became one of the most important people in making the restaurant work. He handled schedules, suppliers, and 100 problems I didn't even know existed. Finally, the day came to open the doors. There was no big celebration. No grand opening party. No fancy advertisements. My family didn't know about it, and they definitely weren't there. It was just a small restaurant, a determined team, and a dream that refused to give up. The first few weeks after opening Ash and Honey were quiet. Only a few people trickled in each day, and some nights I wondered if anyone would ever come at all. I spent most of my time in the kitchen, testing flavors, adjusting sauces, and making sure every dish was exactly how I wanted it. Then one evening, a woman walked in alone. She had a notebook and a camera, and there was something about the way she looked around that made me pause. I didn't recognize her, and I had no idea who she was. I focused on cooking, letting the rhythm of the kitchen guide me. She ordered 3 dishes at first, tasting each one carefully. Then she added 2 more. I didn't speak to her much, only answered her questions when asked. I kept my attention on the food, making sure every plate was perfect. 2 weeks later, the city woke up to a review that changed everything. Nora Bellamy, a respected food critic, had written about Ash and Honey. She called it the most fearless new kitchen in the city, praising the flavors, the creativity, and the attention to detail. The next morning, the phone started ringing nonstop. People wanted reservations immediately. Within a few days, every table for the next few weeks was booked. It felt like someone had flipped a switch. The small restaurant I had poured every bit of my heart into suddenly became the place everyone wanted to try. I worked 16-hour days, sometimes running between the kitchen and the front, making sure every guest had a perfect experience. It was exhausting, but I loved it. Every compliment, every smile from diners made it worth it. I had never felt this proud of something I had built on my own. For the first time, I could see that my dream was real. All those nights of washing dishes, experimenting with leftover ingredients, and sleeping on floors had led to this moment. I had created something meaningful, something that people wanted and appreciated. And through it all, my family still had no idea. They had not called, not visited, not sent a single message. I didn't tell them. I wanted to savor this success quietly, without their judgment or interruption. I was standing on my own, proving that the life I had chosen for myself, against their expectations, was exactly the life I was meant to live. 6 months after opening Ash and Honey, the restaurant was full every night. Candles flickered on the tables, the clinking of glasses mixed with quiet laughter, and the smell of fresh food filled the air. I had finally built a place people loved, a place that felt alive. I stepped out of the kitchen to check on the dining room, making sure everything ran smoothly. That's when the hostess came up to me, her voice barely above a whisper. "Table 7 says they're your family." My heart froze. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. I walked toward the table slowly, my mind racing. And there they were, Douglas, Marlene, Travis, and Paige. My father, mother, older brother, and sister-in-law. All dressed perfectly, sitting like they owned the place. My stomach turned cold. "Nice place," my father said, smiling as I approached. For a second, I almost forgot the past. Almost felt a little warmth. Maybe they were here to apologize, to reconnect after 4 years of silence. But then he leaned back in his chair, his smile fading, and spoke words that made the blood drain from my face. "Since you got your start living under our roof, we deserve 15% of your business." I froze. The words echoed in my head. 15%. They weren't here to celebrate me. They weren't even here to enjoy the restaurant. They were here to take what I had built. For years of silence. For years of being erased from their lives. For years of working every single day, scraping by, building a dream that they didn't believe I could ever achieve. And now this demand from the people who had thrown me out, who had mocked me for wanting to cook, who had refused to support me in any way. The entire dining room seemed to pause, though no one else might have noticed. My hands trembled slightly as I stood there, staring at them, trying to process the audacity. They expected gratitude, expected me to bend, to hand over a piece of the life I had created from nothing. I took a deep breath. For years of struggle had led me here, and I wasn't about to let anyone, not even my own family, claim it. I stepped back toward the kitchen, keeping my calm, but inside I felt the fire of determination grow. This was the moment everything collided, the moment I realized that the people who once controlled my life would no longer control my success. I stared at them, my mind trying to catch up with what I was hearing. My brother, Travis, leaned back in his chair, a smirk curling across his face. "Come on, Alara," he said. "Family helped you get here." My mother, Marlene, nodded and added, "It's only fair." I froze for a moment, remembering the night I had left their house. The way the door slammed behind me. The deafening silence that followed. The tears I held back as I walked away with nothing but 2 suitcases and a little cash. "Where were you 4 years ago?" I asked quietly, my voice low but steady. Douglas, my father, looked at me without a trace of guilt. He shrugged like my question was irrelevant. "You made your choice," he said. My stomach sank. That shrug wasn't just cold, it was dismissive. The same family who claimed they loved me had disappeared completely when I needed them most. And now, here they were, acting like they had any right to my success. Then my eyes fell on the folder my father slid across the table. It landed softly, but the weight of it felt heavy, almost crushing. I opened it slowly, my hands trembling, and inside were stacks of papers. Legal documents. They had prepared a formal claim, complete with legal language and demands. My heart raced. Every memory of being disowned, every night of struggle, every step I had taken to build ash and honey, all of it felt like it was being challenged in a single moment. It hit me like a cold wave. They hadn't come here for dinner. They hadn't come to see the restaurant. They hadn't come to reconnect or to celebrate what I had built. They came for money. I could feel my hands tighten into fists, the air in the restaurant suddenly too heavy to breathe. My family, the same people who told me I would never amount to anything, were trying to take a piece of everything I had built with my own blood, sweat, and tears. For a brief second, I felt anger surge, but I also felt clarity. For years of being erased from their lives had led to this moment. They thought I would be intimidated, that I would fold under the audacity of their demand. But they didn't know me. Not the real me. Not the Alara who had spent years learning, failing, and rising again. They had underestimated the one thing they could never control: my determination. Instead of yelling or arguing, I did something no one expected. I smiled. "Enjoy dinner," I said politely, keeping my voice calm and steady. My father looked at me and nodded, satisfaction clear on his face. He thought I would panic. He thought I would beg or argue or cry. They assumed I would cave, like they always expected I would. But I didn't. I walked past them, keeping my composure, and went straight to the kitchen. Matteo, my manager, noticed my expression and raised an eyebrow. "I need something," I said quietly. He followed me to the office, and I explained what I needed. The security recordings from the night they sent me that letter 4 years ago. The night they threw me out and erased me from their lives. Matteo didn't ask questions. He already knew how serious I could be when I focused on something. He nodded and pulled the recordings for me. I watched the screens carefully, knowing exactly what I was looking for. There it was, the envelope, the handwriting I recognized immediately, and the signatures that had haunted me for years. Douglas and Marlene had sent a letter disowning me completely. They had decided I no longer existed in their world. I remembered how Gideon had insisted I keep that letter. "Hold on to it," he had said. "One day it might be more valuable than you think." At the time, I didn't understand. I only knew it was a painful reminder of the night my family abandoned me. Now it made perfect sense. For the first time in years, I felt a surge of control. They had made a mistake thinking they could intimidate me, thinking they could walk into my restaurant and demand a part of my success. But I had proof, clear, undeniable proof, that they had legally and completely disowned me. I took a deep breath and felt the weight of 4 years of struggle and determination settle in. Every night washing dishes, every late night cooking experiments, every moment I had spent building ash and honey, it had all led to this. My family believed they were stepping into my world with power. They had no idea that the calm I showed was only the beginning. I wasn't just going to defend what I had built. I was about to show them, in the clearest way possible, that they had no claim over me or my success. The storm hadn't started yet, but it was coming, and I was ready. After they finished their meal, Douglas walked up to the front counter again. His steps were slow, deliberate, and full of confidence. "So," he said, leaning slightly forward, "let's discuss our percentage." I stayed calm. I didn't raise my voice, and I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached for something I had kept ready for this exact moment. I placed a framed document gently on the counter between us. It was the disownment letter. Signed clearly by both of my parents, it declared that I was no longer part of the Whitcomb family. It stated that I had no claim to any family resources, no matter how successful I became. I looked Douglas in the eye as I opened the conversation. "But the final paragraph matters most," I said quietly, letting each word land in the room. "It says you have no responsibility for my future actions or my success. You legally cut me out of your lives." The dining room went still. Even the servers and guests noticed the sudden tension. Whispers stopped, glasses paused midair, and all eyes were subtly drawn toward us. Douglas's face changed. The confidence he had worn like armor moments before began to crack. He leaned back, trying to regain control, but it was clear he wasn't used to being confronted this way. "You don't get to erase me," he said, his voice shaky now. "Then collect dividends." I remained composed, feeling a calm power settle over me. For years of being ignored, humiliated, and erased had led to this moment. And now, for the first time, I had the undeniable proof that their claims were meaningless. I let them process it for a few seconds, seeing the disbelief and frustration cross their faces. They had assumed that walking into my restaurant, wearing their authority like a crown, would make me back down, that they could threaten me into giving them a piece of what I had built. But they were wrong. I had done everything on my own, every late night, every early morning, every risk taken to make Ash and Honey what it had become. And now, with one simple document, I turned the tables. No shouting, no confrontation, just facts, just the truth. And for the first time that night, I felt completely in control of my life, my success, and my future. My family might have expected fear or negotiation, but all they got was clarity, and the realization that I was untouchable. Douglas tried to threaten me with lawsuits, his voice rising as he waved the papers in front of him. He expected me to panic, to back down, to give in to their demands. But he didn't know how prepared I was. Mateo had already called our lawyer before the confrontation even began. Every detail was checked, every document in order. Gideon had kept perfect records of his investment, and everything was legal and clear. The Whitcombs had no claim, none at all. No matter how loudly they argued or how much they tried to intimidate me, the truth was on my side. I watched their confidence crumble slowly as they realized their threat had no power here. As they stormed out of the restaurant, their faces red with anger and humiliation, the dining room grew quiet. Diners watched, some glancing between us, sensing the tension but not knowing the story. I didn't look back at them. I didn't need to. The satisfaction was quiet, steady, and entirely mine. I walked back into the kitchen, the familiar smells of seared garlic, fresh herbs, and sizzling pans surrounding me like an embrace. Mateo came over, his expression calm but alert. "You okay?" he asked, reading the mix of exhaustion and triumph on my face. I took a deep breath and let my eyes roam across the kitchen, the dining room, the entire space I had built from nothing. Every table, every chair, every plate and dish held a piece of my work, my effort, and my dedication. This restaurant was my creation. The place my family had said I could never make, the place they would never touch, the place they thought I could never succeed at. They had been proven wrong. For the first time since they walked in, I smiled. Not a small, nervous smile, but a real one, full of pride and relief. Because this was more than revenge. It wasn't yelling, it wasn't anger, and it wasn't confrontation. It was something stronger. The best revenge, I realized, wasn't fighting or screaming or trying to humiliate them in return. The best revenge was creating a life they could never take away. A life built entirely on my work, my choices, and my passion. I stood there for a moment, letting it sink in. The Whitcombs had tried to claim what wasn't theirs. They had failed. I had won. And this time, success was sweeter than anything anger could ever feel. If you've ever faced doubt or been underestimated, remember, persistence, planning, and legal awareness can protect your hard work. Build your dreams carefully, document everything, and stay patient. Success isn't just about proving others wrong. It's about creating a life they can't touch. Start taking steps toward your goals today.